Welcome to the study, everyone. Today, we're immersing ourselves in a truly captivating, really high-stakes narrative from ancient texts. We're actually beginning our journey right at a monumental tectonic shift in ancient history. King Astyages has been laid to rest with his ancestors, and the great Cyrus of Persia has just inherited his vast kingdom. So picture this. It's a completely turbulent time of shifting power, colliding cultures, and deeply, deeply entrenched religious institutions. We're going to explore the psychology of an empire and the unshakable faith of one captive man. But real quick, before we get started with today's deep dive, just a reminder that the source channel and a link is below in the description box. Also, prayers for the Watchmen channels are very much appreciated, and give a hype and like, please. All right, let's jump right in. You know, fundamentally, this study is basically an ancient locked room mystery. It's so fascinating. We have this incredibly powerful Persian king who controls the known world, a deeply faithful captive named Daniel, who, by the way, was honored above all the king's friends, and an entire empire that is completely devoted to institutions and idols that are, well, not exactly what they seem. Now, standing alone against a state-sponsored religion, that is incredibly dangerous. Daniel is entirely vulnerable here. Yet, as we'll see, we are going to carefully uncover exactly how this one man managed to completely dismantle the absolute greatest revered entities of Babylon. And he did it using absolutely nothing but his brilliant, deductive mind and an unshakable faith in the living God. He achieved this staggering victory without ever lifting a single sword or weapon of war. It's truly amazing. Part 1. The mighty idol Bel. So we're introduced to Babylon's chief god. It's this incredibly imposing idol called Bel. And listen, this wasn't just some casual weekend tradition for the locals. This was the absolute center of Babylonian worship and commerce, the whole shebang. King Cyrus himself revered this idol so deeply that he went every single day to adore it. But right in the middle of the king's royal court was Daniel. And Daniel stood in stark, very dangerous contrast to the entire empire, simply because he resolutely worshipped his own god. When the king noticed this insubordination, he actually confronted Daniel directly. He demanded to know why he refused to worship Bel. And the king's belief was firmly rooted in what he literally saw with his own eyes every single day. I mean, take a moment to really consider the sheer, lavish scale of the daily offerings placed before this idol. Every day, the Babylonians provided Bel with 12 great measures of choice, fine flour, 40 plumped sheep, and 6 large vessels of wine. To put that into perspective, that is a staggering 50 gallons of liquid. The daily economic weight of this offering was immense. It was a massive drain on resources. And the king? Well, he watched this mountain of wealth and sustenance vanish every single night. That cemented his absolute awe and unquestioning belief that Bel was a living, consuming, breathing god. So the king confidently challenges Daniel, basically asking if he truly thinks Bel isn't a living god, pointing right to the undeniable proof of how much the idol eats and drinks every day. And Daniel? He just smiles. He isn't intimidated by the empire's vast wealth, the imposing statues, or the king's overwhelming awe. Not at all. Daniel gives this profoundly calm and deeply logical deduction. He says, "O king, be not deceived, for this is but clay within and brass without, and did never eat or drink anything." Daniel knows for a fact that an idol made with human hands, no matter how brilliantly polished and intimidating the shiny brass is on the outside, is entirely dead, completely hollow, and lifeless on the inside. Well, as you might imagine, the king is instantly enraged by this bold claim. To call the chief god of Babylon a hollow fake, that's the ultimate blasphemy. He immediately summons his priests, and we're talking about 70, meaning 70 powerful priests in total, and that's not even counting their wives and children who also benefit from this massive system. The king lays down an incredibly lethal, high-stakes wager. The sheer imbalance here is honestly terrifying. It's 70 entrenched, wealthy priests against one isolated captive man. The king decrees that if the priests cannot certify exactly who is devouring these massive daily expenses, they will all die. But on the flip side, if they can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Bel is indeed the one eating the food, then Daniel will die for speaking blasphemy against the great idol. Daniel, completely unflinching in the face of this terrifying death sentence, simply replies to the king, "Let it be according to thy word." Part 2. The secret temple entrance. Okay. So now we're at the setup of the ultimate test. The king, Daniel, and all 70 priests gather inside the grand temple of Bel. The priests confidently tell the king that they will all leave the temple. They actually boldly dare King Cyrus to personally set out the meats, make ready the wine, shut the heavy temple door fast, and seal it with his very own royal signet ring. The text tells us the priests little regarded it. They weren't the least bit afraid of the king's unbreakable seal or Daniel's dangerous wager. Now, why on earth would they be so confident? Well, because they had a deeply ingrained, systemic deception already in place. Right under the offering table, they had long ago constructed a privy entrance, basically a hidden trapdoor. This wasn't just some one-time trick, you guys. This was a continuous, nightly grift. Night after night, they and their extended families would secretly slip in from below and totally gorge themselves on the lavish offerings, keeping the lucrative illusion of the living idol alive and securing their own wealth and power.
Part 3. Footprints in the Ashes. Let's carefully walk through the chronological timeline of this incredibly tense night. In the evening, as the priests depart, the king sets the immense feast before Belshazzar. But here is where Daniel makes a brilliant, quiet countermove. While he is totally alone in the temple with the king, Daniel commands his personal servants to bring fine ashes. In the presence of the king alone, Daniel silently strews these ashes over the entire pavement of the temple floor. They then exit, shut the massive heavy doors, and the king presses his royal signet into the wax, sealing it fast. The trap is perfectly set. Deep in the silence of the night, exactly as they were wont to do, the 70 priests, along with their wives and children, slip upward through the hidden trapdoor under the table. They happily eat all the choice meat and drink all 50 gallons of wine. They're completely arrogant, probably laughing at the king's seal, and entirely unaware of the delicate ash trap right beneath their feet. Finally, early in the morning, the king arises with Daniel to inspect the results of the wager.
The tension in the cool morning air is just palpable. The king is anxious to see who will live and who will die. He asks, "Daniel, are the seals whole?" Daniel calmly confirms that they remain completely unbroken. As soon as the king breaks his own seal, opens those heavy doors, and looks at the empty table, he is absolutely overjoyed. His paradigm remains intact. He cries out with a loud voice, "Great art thou, O Bel, and with thee is no deceit at all." But Daniel? He simply laughs. He quickly reaches out and holds the king back, physically stopping him from eagerly stepping inside and ruining the delicate, damning evidence left all over the floor. Daniel tells the king, "Behold now the pavement, and mark well whose footsteps are these." The king looks down at the undisturbed ashes, and his entire worldview is completely shattered in an instant. He is utterly horrified to see the clear, undeniable footsteps of grown men, the lighter steps of women, and the tiny footprints of children crisscrossing the supposedly sealed temple floor. The grand deception is completely exposed. The king, boiling with an intense anger and feelings of deep betrayal, immediately arrests the 70 priests and their families. Under threat, they are forced to show him the privy doors they used for their nightly gluttony. The king executes the deceitful priests without mercy and hands the idol Bel over to Daniel. Daniel decisively shatters the brass and clay idol into pieces and utterly destroys its temple, bringing a swift and violent end to the systemic grift.
Part 4. Slaying the Great Dragon.
But hey, the conflict is far from over. In that very same place in Babylon, there was a great dragon, which the people also revered and worshipped with intense devotion. King Cyrus, who is likely still reeling and grappling with his newly shattered worldview regarding Bel, uses this beast to challenge Daniel once again. He points out that unlike the hollow brass and clay of Bel, this terrifying dragon is undeniably a living, breathing creature. It eats, it drinks, it lives. The king demands of Daniel, "Thou canst not say that he is no living God, therefore worship him." But Daniel's faith remains absolute and completely unyielding. He boldly replies, "I worship the Lord my God, for he is the living God." But then Daniel makes an astonishing, audacious request. He asks the king for permission to slay this great, revered monster, and to do it without a sword, without a staff, without any conventional weapon of war whatsoever. The king, probably morbidly curious and still in shock from the exposure of Bel, actually grants Daniel the permission to try. So Daniel's approach to defeating this massive creature is absolutely fascinating. It's essentially a bizarre ancient chemical weapon. Step 1, Daniel gathers highly combustible and sticky pitch, heavy animal fat, and coarse hair. Step 2, he seethes or intensely boils these strange ingredients all together, forming them into dense solid lumps or cakes. Step 3, he takes this lethal, indigestible mixture and puts it directly into the dragon's mouth, feeding it to the aggressive beast. It's such a calculated, visceral approach to defeating this physical entity that the Babylonians had elevated to divine status. He relies entirely on knowledge and intellect rather than brute force. The result of this strange concoction is immediate, chaotic, and totally catastrophic. The text plainly states that shortly after consuming the heavy cakes, the dragon burst in sunder. The great beast is violently and gruesomely destroyed from the inside out, completely unable to digest the weaponized mixture Daniel prepared. Daniel, looking upon the gory remains of the shattered beast, turns to the shocked onlookers and simply says, "Lo, these are the gods you worship." He has proven once again, definitively, that the things Babylon reveres hold absolutely no true enduring power.
Part 5. Into the Lion's Den.
Now, as you can probably guess, exposing deeply held cultural lies often brings severe, violent consequences. When the Babylonians hear about the complete destruction of Bel, the slaughter of their 70 priests, and the explosive death of their sacred dragon, they are filled with just great indignation. A massive, dangerous conspiracy forms against King Cyrus himself. The furious mob corners the king, angrily declaring the king has become a Jew, accusing him of abandoning his ancestral gods. They literally threaten to murder him and his entire household unless he hands Daniel over to them. Seeing his crest hard and fearing a total bloody rebellion, the king, under total political compulsion and duress, caves and hands Daniel over. Daniel is brutally cast into a dark den containing 7 starving lions to be destroyed by the very conspirators who hated his truth. But in the depths of that terrifying den, the miraculous happens. Not only do the ravenous lions completely ignore him, but he is actively sustained. An angel of the Lord miraculously grabs the prophet Habakkuk by the hair all the way in Judea, transporting him to Babylon simply to bring Daniel a hot meal right there in the den. Upon the 7th day, the grieving king goes to the den to bewail the man he assumes is dead. When he looks in, he is utterly astounded to behold Daniel just sitting there, perfectly peaceful, well-fed, and completely unharmed. When we look at this full summary of events, a striking, undeniable pattern emerges. Every single entity that relied on systemic deceit, false authority, or violent force met a definitive, catastrophic end. The hollow idol Bel was destroyed. The living dragon burst asunder. The 70 corrupt, gluttonous priests were executed for their crimes. And those violent conspirators, well, the king immediately orders them cast into the den, where they are devoured in a moment before they even reach the floor. But Daniel, who stood entirely alone against an empire using faithful deduction, quiet intelligence, and an unwavering trust in the living God, is completely vindicated. The king dramatically pulls him out of the den and proclaims with a loud voice that there is none other beside the Lord God of Daniel. This ancient study leaves us with a deeply powerful reflection for our own modern times. Daniel saw past the shiny brass and the dead clay. He saw past the sheer intimidating volume of the empire's wealth and past the violent threats of the mob. He saw the quiet ashes on the floor, and he knew the absolute truth. So we really have to ask ourselves, what false idols are we currently feeding in the secret rooms of our own lives? What systemic deceptions are we allowing to silently consume our resources, our time, and our energy, simply because we haven't stopped to scatter the ashes and look closely at the footprints? Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey through Daniel 14. Keep questioning the things around you, keep actively seeking the truth, and I'll see you in the next study.